Okay, last part of the show today, panel discussion. Can I invite Sam and Lucas and Ronald up to the panel? And did we ever see from Ivan? Okay, so it's just the three of you. Come on up. In that case, I'm going to join you down here and we'll all pass the microphones back and forth because it seems like that's a little bit more comfy. Thank you. All right, here we are. This has been a mind-expanding day. Thank you all for your contributions. The future seems very, very bright, and I'm going to first throw this to Ronald. Okay, the future is bright, but how do we get to that bright future from here? What do we need to do concretely to make this happen? Because people have a lot of great ideas. There's no shortage of great ideas in this room or from what we've been hearing, but it sounds like that bridge isn't quite all the way there yet.
Absolutely. I think the first thing we have to do is just start by having a conversation with one another, like we're doing here today, as I mentioned when I introduced you. I think there are a number of other steps we can take, and sometimes the best thing we can do is look to what has come before and what's worked, and maybe borrow some of the best parts from that and take it forward. So there have been a lot of questions today around the regulatory issues that the industry is facing in jurisdictions, both here and internationally, many of the same things. We'll save this conversation more for tomorrow. This is the tech session day, more or less, but I will comment a little bit on it. I can tell you a bit about what ADCA is doing and what it's advocating as to a potential solution to put a framework around digital currencies such as Bitcoin and bring it into the mainstream. We've looked to a couple of other proven formulas and associations that have championed or implemented a self-regulatory model with some healthy government oversight. So for us, as an organization, we've looked to the Australian Payment and Clearing Association, APCA. As I understand it, and I could be wrong, but as it was told to me about 20-odd years ago, a gentleman had an idea to send funds electronically between the major banks here in Australia. And he headed into the offices of one of the major law firms here in Australia and presented this idea, and it didn't get much traction in the first year. So what the initiative he had called, the enterprise was called FPOS, which, as you know, that's a debit card in our wallet. We take it out. That's how you pay for your goods at any merchant. So FPOS didn't get much traction initially. So what they were advised was to create an association, which they did, called APCA. APCA, I believe, garnered 9 members in the first year. Today there's over 90. You can't be a bank or a financial institution in Australia without being a member of APCA. APCA is the association which issues BSB numbers. So BSB, an account number, is what you need to send funds from one bank account to another. So they began with a self-regulatory model as well, very simple, a few simple steps early on, and it evolved over time, eventually to the point where it had reached mainstream as it did, that it did require legislation from the government, and their association helped draft to the best they could some of that legislation and brought it to the key stakeholders, the regulators, government, and worked together and essentially developed a framework that they were able to use that has brought it well and truly into the mainstream. This is something that we're looking at ourselves at the Australian Digital Currency Commerce Association. What we've come up with is essentially 3 membership types that will be available to potential members. The first being something we call industry member, and that is for Bitcoin-centric businesses or digital currency-centric businesses. The second type is called associate member, and that is available to merchants or service providers who may accept digital currencies such as Bitcoin. And then finally, partner members, and that's open to some of the counterpart associations that we see arising overseas. Japan has something called JADA. Singapore, JADA stands for the Japanese Authority of Digital Assets, I believe. Singapore Access. In the UK, they have the Digital Currency Association. Tomorrow we have Perry Ann Bowering on from the US. She's the president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce over there. So that's what that third membership type will be open to, partner member. Now the key here is industry member within Australia, the digital currency, Bitcoin-centric businesses. They'll additionally be eligible to apply for something called an ADCA certification. and that is benchmarked essentially off an AFSL, an Australian Financial Services license. And if you apply for the certification and meet a set of criteria, then you would get that seal of approval, and that would aim to at least point at which businesses, digital currency businesses, are walking on the sunny side of the street, make it a little easier for other stakeholders to know where folks are placed, and hopefully bring comfort to the stakeholders such as the banking sector, the regulators, and government. So just quickly, a few of those requirements they'd have to meet, eligibility requirements with the certification, include, first of all, a background check. So we would perform a set of police checks, disqualified directorship checks, bankruptcy checks on the directors of the company that are applying, number one. Number two, they would next need to implement a comprehensive anti-money laundering program. Number three, that program would then need to be audited by one of our providers, and there are a number of them out there that have raised their hand that said that they will help develop their own internal checks and balances and services to fit a digital currency business. Next, they would also have to acquire some professional indemnity insurance, and we are speaking with a couple of leading insurance providers, both here in Australia and international providers. Then a financial services ombudsman as well. They would have to register with one of our DC financial services ombudsmen. And that's to handle some of the consumer protection considerations that we have to face as an industry as we grow. And finally, what we'd be asking, one of the great questions is not about the auditability of the blockchain and Bitcoin. You can see every transaction that's moved from A to Z. It's a matter of knowing who is behind it. And what we'd be asking those members to do is raise their hand and essentially lay claim to their part of the blockchain and say, these are my wallets, registered wallets, we call it. And again, that should help provide some comfort, we hope, to the different stakeholders that'll be involved. And that's a high-level summary of what the ADCA certification looks like. That'll be open for industry members, and that we hope begins to tick a number of the boxes as to the concerns that we've heard from some of the folks here today and abroad. So that's a bit about ADCA.
I've got a different approach to Mark's question. I mean, Kasia, memory back to 1996. I got into computers around Commodore 64s, so the older people remember them. And then this internet thing come along, and I don't know how many trumpet windsock scripts I wrote for people. I didn't even have a driver's license, but I had to go around because I was the kid that knew computers, and I hacked my way through it. And I had copies of Netscape on a magazine that I bought, and I brought it to people's houses, and I said, this is your browser. This is where you type www. So the way I think we should start adoption is start showing people how to use the clients, go through which wallets have their pros and cons, and show them, and you'll have to do that hand-holding. And you will make mistakes, so start out small. Like everything, start being risk averse. Start out small, and you'll have to, like I said, you show people how to use Bitcoin. And we all have these social engagements. I'm sure of it. Where we all go to the pub or a meal at lunch or someone, and there's always someone who wants to put it on their credit card and pay you back in cash, and then you go back to the office and you're always $10 short or whatever. You know that situation. Offer to pay that person back in Bitcoin, or I'm going to the Ashes next Saturday or the Saturday after, so I'm offering to pay for that ticket back in Bitcoin. Now, using Living Room of Zasarsky or other people, they can then pay that on and pay their credit card off. So that's how the adoption will start, is by showing people how to use it and start paying people back, use it as a currency, and start that flow.
Sam.
Cool. Well, from my perspective, I believe that as long as the government bodies as well as the regulators in this country get the right priorities in the digital currency space, they would be able to attract vast amount of capitals that will be injected into Bitcoin-related startups here in Australia, and basically make Australia the epicenter of the new digital currency revolution. And definitely, I believe what Ron is doing, as well as these guys here, is definitely opening up the dialogue that is necessary in order for digital currency to succeed, not only here in Australia but globally, because we don't have 48 states like this, like America, which has regulations and remittance laws on a state level. That is highly inefficient. That's not what digital currency is all about, and digital currency is the future. So I believe the work that's been put in so far, the dialogue that's put in so far, actually has allowed us, Bitcoin Group, to progress very successfully with our listing application on the ASX. And based on this kind of progress that we're making, we're able to then easily convince investors from overseas that this is a safe haven if they want to get exposure into the digital currency space.
Just to follow up on that, if I may, I think we need to take a bit of a holistic approach. So I think it is very much what Lucas has hit it on the head, as well as what we're advocating and championing, working with regulators. And I think absolutely bringing the investors in, and they're here, they're raising their hands. There's a lot of enthusiasm around it now, and it's just a matter of continuing this dialogue and the work that all of us are doing, all of us in this room as well. Even just showing, the guy next to you how to download a Bitcoin wallet. Somebody did that for me 18 months ago, and that's why we're here today. So simple things that we can do today.
So that's, I want to touch on that, and I'm very glad you brought this point up, Lucas, because it is very well and good to have corporations and professional associations on all of that, and that's absolutely needed. And that creates the sort of the openness to it. But we're also in a situation, and Elizabeth pointed this out, where these systems are really hard to use right now. Trumpet Windsock wasn't so hard to use, because I ran around San Francisco installing it all on all of my friends' computers. I was like, give me a half an hour, bam, you're up on Netscape, because that's how you got people on the web. A Bitcoin wallet, there's that string, or there's a QR code, and I don't know if you've ever seen a flow chart of when you should use a QR code, and the flow chart always goes to no, all right? But, so we've created systems that are not friendly, and so we haven't created the desire, and the desire was the key thing that caused the web to take off. So how do we get there? To use the analogy, jetpacks are the future too, but using a jetpack burns your backside, so we don't use jetpacks. So what do we need to do to create the demand, to create the desire from people to use these systems, so that even if the banks are sort of on the fence about it, they have to come in because there's a pull and demand?
Might start. Look, I think the awareness is there. I think the enthusiasm is there as well. Like I said, 18 months ago, I think maybe 2 out of 10 people that I'd speak with had heard of Bitcoin. Today, it's easily 9 out of 10. I think people want to be able to use it. I think it's about making it as easily accessible and as easy to use as some of the products we have here. Apple iPhone is a fantastic product. It's simple to use. It's works really well. It looks great. And I think when somebody develops some of the wallets and tools to be able to interact with Bitcoin and use Bitcoin as easily as we've seen the likes of Apple do, you're going to see it explode. That's one, and a bit of the holy grail. And I think Mark, you mentioned earlier as well, so some of that is just timing, right? And the right pieces of the puzzle have to come together. Number 2, when we do have the PayPals of the world and the Googles and the eBays who are seriously looking into this and are making great inroads already, the minute they broadly adopt this and bring it to the masses, it's going to touch everybody, not just Australians, but everybody in the world, and then it's upon us. So this is again why it's so important that us, as well as the banks, as well as the governments, we all have these conversations now and think about what small steps we can take today to make sure that things are received and go well. And of course, I certainly want to see Australia as a leader, certainly regionally, potentially even globally, and again, that's why we're here.
Well, I think it comes to, crossing the chasm again. And me and Lucas are actually working on a very interesting project. It's establishing free Bitcoin boulevards here in Australia. One in Launceston, one in Melbourne Chinatown, and the other one on Boundary Road, I believe.
Yeah, we're looking at Boundary Street in the West End. We think it's probably got because of the nature, everyone who knows the West End, Bitcoin probably resonates well with the people who are around that area, and also a lot of independent bars. So we're hoping to spread it through there with the bit-to-bit cos guys who have an ATM, which we're trying to get installed down there.
Yeah, definitely. And to essentially have a lot of merchants in a dense location adopt Bitcoin really should have the impact to tell essentially people around there, as well as the world, that Bitcoin is coming to your main street. It is on its way. And these are all just trial Bitcoin boulevards, but it does show the potential. So people will, for instance, travel and make the effort to shop along that street, knowing that the Bitcoins that they have in their mobile phone wallet could be spent along this street.
So this is very similar to towns that set up their own local currencies, right, in order to promote sort of growth of the local town and to keep the money in the town. Is it similar to that?
Well, yes and no. It is essentially having a vibrant little economy in certain streets within each town, but the currency that we're using is not a closed loop system, it's Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is global. That's what we want. So we believe this kind of push will bring people to see Bitcoin as something that is real, and that will put Bitcoin front of mind for them. Now, in order to push all this, to do all the marketing, to do all the promotion, obviously there needs to be a capital backing us, and to be able to for instance, make money through mining means that we need to make sure that the Bitcoin ecosystem succeeds, because the Bitcoins that we mine need to be worth more for us to have it look good on the books. So therefore, there will always be a portion of what we raise in terms of capital, as well as mine in terms of Bitcoins, reinvested into promoting Bitcoin in a coordinated fashion to the mass market.
I'd just like to say, for adoption, I think merchants will really drive this. If you've ever sold anything on the internet, I have a good use case I gave. I sold a pair of shoes, I couriered it to a guy's house, and then the guy paid, and PayPal just one day sent me an email, say, hey, this is a fraudulent transaction, we're ripping the money out of your bank. The bank then charged me with an overdraft fee. I was on the phone for hours with PayPal, no one ever returned my call. Yeah, I had a signed courier slip, so and that just broke me selling things online. So, but I think the merchants probably aren't aware of the benefits, and by the same token, we have to then show the benefits. Hey, there is a demand. Look, will you accept? And just ask that question: will you accept Bitcoin? We're now seeing Wikipedia accept Bitcoin as donations because enough people are. So, there is a real concrete advantage being a merchant and being an honest merchant and selling. It's getting them to adopt. And then there'll be a competitive edge. I think if a few pubs in the city start paying Bitcoin, then the other guy will need to. It's same. The Exchange Hotel has an iPhone app. I don't know why they have an iPhone app, but it's probably because the pub next door has an iPhone app. So that's how we'll see the adoption. And as Sam mentioned, just crossing the chasm. So, but it's up to us to ask. It's up to us to show the merchants that it is viable and it is a good payment method.
I just want to add one more thing. What got me really hooked into Bitcoin was my role as a director at a small e-commerce company called Millennius. It sells consumer electronic goods, and if people understand this industry, it's essentially offloading the latest and greatest consumer electronic gadgets at near margin, because we are trying to get them to buy accessories, and that's where the margins are made. The problem is, there could be a scenario similar to what Lucas has described. They use a fraudulent credit card, pay for a brand new iPhone 6. We ship out the product, and 3 days later get that money clawed back from our bank. That means we've just essentially given a product away for free. Now, we need to factor that into the cost of us doing business. So instead of just letting that happen, we now offer a Bitcoin discount for all Bitcoin payments. And that essentially forces a very cutthroat consumer electronics e-tailer market to rethink and go, hang on, these guys are offering a 5% discount to all Bitcoin accepting users. If we don't do the same thing, then we'll be outpriced again and again and again. And by doing so, they essentially eventually adopted Bitcoin as well. And so now you have hundreds, if not thousands of merchants, e-tailers that adopt Bitcoin around the world.
So, given that this is the G20 and Australia has the stage right now, and it's Australia's stage to do what it wants, does Australia have a leadership role in Bitcoin? I mean, obviously we're having this thing now. The 3 speakers that we had dial in from Skype all came from North America, 2 of them from the Bay Area, 1 of them from Washington. And so I'm wondering if Australia has a leadership role, but also where are the other power centers in this?
I think Australia certainly has a leadership role in this for a few reasons. I'm fortunate enough to come from the other side of the pond myself, and I walked into a situation post-GFC where I saw an economy that was thriving and robust, not just shopping bags in people's hands and inventory packed to the ceiling in shops, modern inventory, and frankly a proud, happy spirit, something I haven't seen on the other side in quite a number of years. Beyond that, you just have to take a look at the financial services framework that Australia has. It's world leading. We have banks that punch well above their weight globally for a smaller population, and I think that the blueprint, the architecture is all there for us to be able to just take a look at, again, some of the better parts of that and frame up something that suits this emerging fintech, digital currency industry. So yes, I think Australia really does, and I think if we even just think about it first regionally, then...
But then what do we need to do to make that happen? I mean, it's nice to say that, but what are the concrete steps that we would need to put into place to make that happen?
Right. Well, as I described early on, I think I think what the work ADCA is doing and the certification and the membership suite that we've proposed, a self-regulatory model with some healthy government oversight is a first step. I think next we continue the dialogue with all of the stakeholders. I think we can do that through the professional associations that exist throughout the country who are already reaching out. We've had a number of engagements with folks like the Australian Institute Superannuation Trustees. There's the Australian Retailers Association that's out there, and many hundreds, if not thousands, of their members are very interested in how they can take advantage of the low-cost savings that are involved with Bitcoin's payment network aspect. I think dialogue like this and speaking with the media, I think it's a great way to get it going. I think from here, and it is being received well. Some of the work that ADCA has been doing and what it's proposed, we're on top of every headline that's coming out of the news every day, and we do have an ongoing dialogue with our international counterparts and keeping an eye on what other jurisdictions are doing. We're already a good half dozen steps ahead of the crowd. So I think we carry on with conversations like this and dialogue, and I think next, perhaps what we do is we think about formalizing a conversation like this a little more. We've had some great conversations here today with some of the people that you've seen come in, and I think what we might want to take a look at and what we're talking about is potentially an official summit later in 2015 where we bring a number of these stakeholders together from other jurisdictions, I think from their governments, and I think industry leaders, both incumbents and fintech. We have great dialogue with a number of these folks, and let's have a formal conversation and talk about how we can frame something up that's going to suit the global nature of this thing moving forward. And perhaps then we carry on again next time this year.
All right, so Sam, I mean, in some ways, this question is perfect for you because if you successfully complete you've filed the paperwork for your IPO now, right?
Not yet,
Okay,
because ASIC and and us are still going back and forth on a few details.
That's part of the process, though.
Yes.
That's the thing. All right, so you're in the process of filing for your IPO.
That's correct.
Which is really what I meant, because that's the key thing there. In some ways, you do put Australia on the map in a way that no other country has the moment that you do that the filing is completed, right? So how does that then maybe create a path for Australia to be a location for digital currency startups, digital currency IPOs?
Sure. Australia, I guess, just to explain what we're doing, it's pretty much after seeing DCC do their reverse listing, did we realize that this opportunity was also open to us. So we really need to thank them for their efforts as well. They are essentially our inspiration. We believe that Australian government is a part of what they're essentially trying to do is bring capital from the Chinese economy and having it invested in Australia. That's why we have such great migration policies, especially for people with $5 or $15 million, and we know who they're targeting at the end of the day. So usually this money is spent directly into Australian real estate. And this is essentially some wealthy Chinese individual land banking. And if we could only take 1% of that and have that invested into Australian startups, that would do wonders for our ecosystem. But the thing is, we're not a Silicon Valley, and what has happened recently is China has, in their next 5-year plan, been specifically mandated to build their own Silicon Valley right out of Beijing. So in other words, what is our point of differentiation? What is Australia's point of differentiation? And I believe digital currency, we've already 2 steps ahead of all our competitors, so why not push that advantage? Why not become the digital currency capital of the world? And for instance, a part of what we've been doing is we've released out a 600 square meter office in Melbourne, labelled it Melbourne Bitcoin Technology Centre, MBTC. And through that, we have gifted it to the community. So Bitcoin startups in the local community can utilize that office in order to network, to reach out, and to work together in building the ecosystem. So this is the kind of collaboration we want to bring, and to push this agenda forward. I think it's a team effort. So, a pat on the back to everyone who actually made the effort to come here.
You didn't answer the other half of the question. Where are the power centers in Bitcoin now and in digital currency more generally?
Sure. Well, obviously Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and then you got to look at fin and tech, financial and technology. So what's that amount to? London, we know Brussels is the regulatory center of the financial world. New York, and then obviously we bring the tech into it. We've got Silicon Valley and Asia. I think Australia is pretty well placed to be able to take advantage of a lot of that. This is why we're discussing now about a formalization of this conversation moving forward. It'll likely be in San Francisco, actually. It's smack in the middle of all of these places to help foster that dialogue.
It's interesting because when I go over there for the launch conference every year and see all these startups pitching, and most of them are Bay Area based, the fintech startups are actually almost always from like the Midwest or from New York, and they flew over. So it is, although it's a great technology center, it's not very strong on it doesn't have depth in finance. And I'm wondering if that's going to play out, so that in fact the crown that Silicon Valley holds is going to be passed to a London because it's a currency exchange, or to New York because the market's so more sophisticated there.
I'm not sure why it necessarily has to be centered anywhere, given the decentral nature of digital currency and Bitcoin itself. I think so far as
But it's got to do with talent pools, right? You know, I mean, this room, you probably have a lot of people who know a lot about Bitcoin. If somewhere were hiring, this would probably be a good room to be doing hiring in.
Skype managed to stay on the wheels here today, fortunately. So I think where people are located is probably going to be less of an issue. I think bringing people together is still always going to be very important, which is why we want to continue these conversations, probably yearly, in line with the G20 leader summits. Beyond that, I think we've got all the tools and all the technology to be able to produce excellent results, from wherever we might be.
I just want to add that there are a lot of smart people everywhere, including in China. But the reason they cannot get a digital currency startup off the ground, especially in the payments field, is because they don't have regulatory support. They don't have government support. They don't have banking support. So all I'm saying is smart people are everywhere, but to actually have Ron push the agenda with the Australian government and stakeholders to make Australia a really receptive place for digital currency will essentially be the key that makes us succeed.
Sam, thank you for feeding me my next question, which was, so what should the Parliament be doing about all of this?
I think they're doing the right things, honestly. I think with
Well, what are they doing?
Bitcoin inquiry, digital currency inquiry that's been announced. We have Senator Dastieri. He's the chair of the Economics Committee. He announced the Bitcoin inquiry a couple of months ago, and we certainly applaud that because it brings the questions out into the open that need to be asked. I think they haven't taken steps necessarily backwards as other places in the world have. We know China's taken turned the taps down. We know Russia's done the same thing, and a few other places in South America as well. I think Australia has taken the right approach, which is let's not jump the gun. Let's take a little bit of a wait and see. Let's start asking the right questions. They've allowed business to continue and operate and thrive. We've maintained a dialogue with all key stakeholders from government. I think, look, the report is due out first sitting in March, the Bitcoin Senate inquiry report, and I think we'll have a lot of answers that are going to be needed, and government will be well informed by that time, and they're going to continue to be.
I have a different approach, is don't worry about what the government say. They can't even get daylight savings right up here. So, I mean, if you want daylight savings, I've got a trick. Just get up an hour earlier. And if you don't get up an hour earlier, and I'm sure your boss will agree for you to come in an hour late. You can make up excuses, you got kids or something. So don't wait for the government. Just start trading in Bitcoin, start your own companies, run with it, and then they'll come and ask you.
And I agree. I mean, that is the point of government there, is not to, set it up ahead of time, but if they have to manage some of the downsides afterwards, that's absolutely why we get together as a group of individuals and form governments. But yeah, absolutely. I think we have to be doing all of this at the same time. We have to be, it's a matter of, frankly, I think common sense and best practice and dialogue and conversation and initiative and an entrepreneurial spirit and seizing the opportunities that are in front of us while we can.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that we'd ask at any normal tech conference when we're talking about a new technology. I'm going to start with Lucas on this. What are the digital currency killer apps?
That's a good one. I don't know how sexy can you make paying someone? I don't know. It's a bit boring. Well,
if I'm getting paid, it's very sexy.
It's funny when you work in a bank, they say we're going to release a new product, and it's like, okay, we're going to change the interest rate from 5% to 5.1, and that's a big announcement. And I always make the joke. It's like the razor blades. What's the new innovation? We're going to put 6 razor blades on, so instead of 5. So I don't know. I think it's just making it easy. I mean, back to the iPhones. Now they're integrating all your messaging, and you don't really know what messaging platform you're using. It's the same with browsers. You don't know if you're on HTML or HTTP or FTP. So I think it's just going to have this just ease, easy user interface. People might not know what a Bitcoin address looks like. They might just be sending via email. They might be sending via text. It doesn't matter. But the way we're going to get to that killer app is by using it and providing feedback. So, like I said, paying bills with Bitcoin is a bit cumbersome. It's easier to use internet banking, let's be honest. But if we don't keep trying and pushing, we'll never get that light bulb moment of how to make it better. So we need to embrace the technology, understand there is friction, but you just keep using it and resonating your feedback to the community.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember, what Bitcoin is used for, not just how it operates. That's where we need people a lot smarter in this room to answer those questions than I. But if we remember how it's being used as a currency. It's being used as a payment processing network. It's being traded like shares and stocks on the Bitcoin exchanges. One drives the other. And I think really it gets its legs from the payment processing end first, to be honest. I think whoever figures out exactly the right killer app for the currency end that's going to come back to them in spades. But I mean, look, the processing end of it, remittances. We've talked a little bit about that earlier. I mean, it's a system that allows you to settle transactions in 3 to 4 minutes, publicly, open source. It's visible on the net. We talked about the Philippines sending $670 million a year from Australia back. I did about 6 weeks ago stand in line at the post office, and we were held up because the chap in front of us spent 19 minutes filling out a Western Union form, and was paying, I don't know, 9 to 15% is what they say some of these remittances cost. It's quite expensive, and we can do this essentially for almost nothing if you do it properly. That's the niche remittances. We can talk about the iron ore, saving grace for Australia during the GFC, so they say. That's $4.5 billion a year in transaction fees, remittance fees are being paid between the mines and the buyers in China, and they're paying on average, I think, 9% PA at the end of the year. 3 to 4 days to settle. If you have the currency fluctuations over the weekend, that's going to kill you. But we can do it in 2 to 3 minutes, and we can do it for 1 to 2% if you want to use a service such as some of these great Bitcoin startups here in Australia. So I think we just have to always take a little bit of a holistic approach, step back and see where the benefits and the gains are, and the rest is going to play itself out naturally. We've got some great innovators, we've got some great minds, we've got intelligent people here, I think from the ground up. And as you touched on a little earlier, Australia as well. Look, I think we're leading the way. We're a few steps ahead here. Self-regulatory model, leave it in the hands of business and enterprise. We're smart people. We're going to look around and see what works and try to take that forward. And we're getting great reach out from, frankly, some of the biggest companies in the world are literally coming in to have chats with ADCA and its representation to find out about what it is we're proposing, because it is attractive. And hey, look, I think Australia very well could be placed to be certainly a regional center in this emerging digital economy, and potentially even globally if we just continue to make smart, simple, common sense, agile moves now.
Sam, any thoughts on the killer app?
Well, I think the killer app will come in the form of rescuing the citizens of a country whose economy is just about on the brink of collapse. Because don't you forget, we live in Australia. It's a very stable economy. We've survived the GFC with no scratches whatsoever. And I believe we take our economy for granted. The policies that our regulators have put out have helped us through and avoided the worst that the GFC could have brought. Countries such as Venezuela and China, with capital controls, they have no options when it comes to how to protect their wealth. They are essentially locked into a country that has very restrictive capital controls. And if that country was to make the wrong moves, then there is no option for their citizens to escape that shitstorm. Excuse my French. So I believe if you're able to figure out a way to assist these people when a scenario like that hits, then you will make a lot of money.
So it could very well be a Ukraine or Tunisia that would be, a country that would simply move into Bitcoin because their own currency has collapsed. Something as simple as that.
Well, just on that note, don't forget how Bitcoin rose to prominence
Right.
amongst
Cyprus.
the masses was the Cyprus issues about 18 months ago when their economy was on the brink, and that's how we saw it. Cat get out of the bag on that one.
All right, last question of the day. You are each going to have a minute or so to answer it. And, it's interesting that we call this the global digital currency conversation. In a lot of ways, it's the global distributed authenticity, trust, whatever we want to call it, conversation. It's around that. It's around a whole set of possibilities. Where are things in 20 years? We have this now. We're starting to work with it. Where are things in 20 years? Small question.
I think, like I touched on before, I don't think we'll know as what the underlying protocol will be. We would just send money, and people will just receive it, and it's just like you get your phone and you just browse to a web page, and we don't even understand what the technology is, and to be honest, we don't really care. So I think from the remittance market, it'll just be like, we just send money, and we'll look back and say what you had to use Visa and Master, and what PayPal, and I think we'll just laugh at those technologies. Everything will just be embedded into everything, and you just send, and it could be send anything, any smart contract or any token, and it'll just be the taboo.
I mean, it's like, because when I talk to classes now, they know what a punched card is, but they've never ever seen one. How many of you have seen a punched card? Yeah, but the younger people have never seen one.
I think your punch card analogy is spot on because, to be honest, in 20 years, when my kids are, older, I don't believe they would even know what Bitcoin is because it will be hidden behind the layers and the layers of applications built on top of this payment network. And I think that's the true success of Bitcoin because it is essentially a revolution, a technology that provides a more advanced and frictionless method of transmitting data for a trusted network. And because of that, I don't see my kids needing to understand what Bitcoin is all about. They just use it.
That's a tough one to peg exactly what, but I do think back to 20 years ago when I sent my first email from a real Netscape 1.0 BBS system. I mean, I knew that what was happening was important even back then at that age, and the possibilities were just unimaginable at the time. But look at the world we live in today. I mean, you can literally take a thought out of your head, tap it in a button, and it's in the mind of somebody else halfway around the world, We're so much more closer than we are. I've got family and friends all over the world, and we're not that far apart anymore. And I think what's to come is going to be perhaps equally as unimaginable, but I think it's going to be something quite stellar and something quite spectacular.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Lucas and Sam and Ronald. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for hanging out with us over the day. Just to review briefly, we've heard from some amazing folks who have filled our heads with a lot of very interesting ideas. Elizabeth Stark, who is very much about the possibilities, everything from voting to marriage contracts that are now being written. Jerry Brito, who talked to us about this new law that's about to come through New York that will probably shape, the BitLicense will probably shape all of Bitcoin and all digital currency work around the world. Because even if it's done wrong, it's going to be the thing that we're all going to end up referring to as don't do that. but it will be the first thing that will allow the regulatory institutions to start to encounter it. And then we talked to Lucas, who's very much sort of in the trenches, forward-facing, and looking at how people are using and should be using the blockchain. We heard from Sam, and Sam's really developed, this is an interesting, innovative business model that's about to go public that will provide a way for capital to enter the market, into Bitcoin mining, which is something that our final guest, Kevin Joe, would be very interested in, because as an economist, his job is to understand how financial formations like your company affect the ebb and flow of the Bitcoin price. So what we're seeing is that there are all of these amazing pieces. They're all strung together by this technology, the blockchain, this idea that it is possible for a group of people to collaborate together and decide what's true. And now that we have a technology to support that, everything we do with it is merely a matter of imagination. Now, before I conclude, one very good bit of news. Immediately after this, rather than waiting for an hour, drinks will be served downstairs. I look forward to talking to all of you there. Thank you very much.